We're going to be talking through today's MLB slate. We got a giant one, and it's going to, well, not giant. It's a really big one. It's not as big as they come, but it's a big one. And it should be fun. Hopefully it's a nice bounce back of a really rough night last night. Kind of looking forward to a full slate. There's a few things that I really like here. But yeah, it was an ugly slate for me last night. Cheeks, did you do anything before we jump into game by game?
Yeah, I commented in the chat. If all people had to do if they want to win all the money is like show up for our 12 o'clock thing yesterday and just do what I said I was going to do, and then just like never look at another bit of content.
And then ignore the rest of us.
Yeah, just Cubs and Wisniewski, and that was but he still needed, I guess, the Pirates to score their 18 runs. But yeah, I mean, listen, I was between a couple of things. I ended up settling on Texas and Milwaukee, and it was one of those weird nights where 15 minutes into the slate, I'm counting my six figures. I got home runs from Young, and not only that, but I only had a 3-man from Texas, and everybody else in Texas made out that inning. You know what I mean? Literally perfect. And then DeGrom was off to the races. He was 90% on, so he wasn't going to be a big deal one way or the other. And I was all ready to go. And then next thing you know, first of all, Jordan Lyles turns into freaking Greg Maddux and doesn't let a single guy out for the rest of the game.
He was only cashing lineups last night, by the way.
What's that?
Lyles was the only cashing lineups I had were Lyles.
And then DeGrom just disappeared into the dugout after 4 innings, which he does that from time to time. And then Burns kind of flopped, and Milwaukee couldn't get off their ass, and Pittsburgh smashed. So it went from like counting my 6 figures to counting my negative 80%. That's the way it goes sometimes. But as I say, at least I lost in the NBA too. So it wasn't just MLB.
What a waste of the NBA, because it would have been a perfect night like to script with what I was talking about. Because if I just so it was really interesting that we'll jump into the NBA stuff
sure.
later today. But the thing that was crazy to me was just the NBA was like, wow, this is like such a there's so many possible value. Like I mentioned the Davion Mitchell because they want him for defense, especially if they had the lead in the game. And Davion Mitchell, of course, played a ton of minutes, was playing the crunch time, and ended up with like 30 fantasy points at 3,400. And Day'Ron Sharpe, of course, didn't play because they were very intelligently. Brooklyn decided to play 5 out and barely even played Claxton.
Yeah,
because they tried to counter the only way they could beat Embiid, and they very intelligently did it. And just something to keep an eye out going forward. But it was just a little frustrating when I looked at some of the guys who had big nights. I was like, God, this was doable, But anyway, we're on to baseball. It's a great slate. We got a million things to choose from. So why don't you start us off with the first one, and I'm going to jump in right after you.
So Yankees and the Angels. Now, as you mentioned, there are quite a bit of options tonight. I was able to narrow it down. As a matter of fact, on FanDuel, I have something. I mean, it's like so obvious that it's probably going to be just like so popular. I probably won't play. But it's almost worth me playing. I really like something over there. We'll get there, but not in this game. And DraftKings, and also I may have a couple of spots that I want to probably gamble on. And right now, I think the Yankees are just barely on the outside of that realm. It was obviously Pittsburgh and Colorado is going to be chalky, whatever. And then there's a couple of teams I'm kind of like looking to pivot off of, and the Yankees are right now just barely off of that list, but threatening. And I'm not getting to either of the pitchers in this game. You like anything in here?
I do think that I think there's an argument to be made for both of these offenses. It's obviously, as you know, you're in New York, so I'm not going to tell you what the weather is, but it's not. It's a little chillier, but there is 14-mile-an-hour winds blowing out to center field. It's only 53 degrees, but I look for a reason. And with a guy like Suarez, a wide range of outcomes guy who can get a little wild at times, it does seem like a spot where the Yankees could take advantage of that. So I guess I'm open to both offenses. They're expensive, especially the Angels. But if Volpe leads off, I think he's going to be a priority play, and I like this. I like this spot for the Yankees. So I have both the Yankees and the Angels as pretty solid up my list, and I don't think you're going to have to deal with, outside of very early, bizarre, hilarious projections. It just happens sometimes with SaberSim where a guy gets rated, but it looks like they may have fixed it now, because initially Shohei Ohtani, they still got Shohei Ohtani at 70% ownership. But earlier he was 128% projected ownership. So that was a very alarming number. And he was also
I
projected
think
to
he's
score.
going to come in a little lighter than that.
Yeah, he was projected to score like 38 fantasy points. And I'm like, oh, well, if he scores 38 fantasy points, I will pick him. I don't mind. I'll eat the 128.
I might take a shot if he's going to score that many fantasy points.
Yeah, that seemed a little crazy, but it's just an early projection. That's what you get sometimes. But yeah, both right off the bat, both these are definitely in play for me. Neither are my favorite, but certainly two teams I'm definitely considering.
So what I'm going to do for the purposes of this show from now on is I'm gonna just like put in the stuff that's for me like the best as of as of that moment. Just kind of see where. So right now I really don't have any pitcher yet. So I'll throw the Yankees in here. And again, I didn't really care who's in what position, whatever. Just throwing some guys in here, and we'll see if we can replace them.
And it looks pretty good to me. All right, let's talk about this other one. I think that there is an argument in this Baltimore-Washington game. Is that what you have next?
Yeah.
I think there's an argument that no one here's a pitcher no one will play on DraftKings that for some reason I always like to take shots on. He's 6,200. I am open to the idea of taking a shot on Kremer just because I'm open against the Nationals in general. I like to try and attack them, and Kremer is adequate enough, even though he's off to a rough start this year, where I'm actually considering him as just like a get weird play. The main story for this one, though, is going to be you have a pitcher in Josiah Gray who I actually like. Again, I still maintain that what I always think about him. He's very talented. He's trying to figure himself out right now. And his problem is he just runs into a million home runs. And it's going to be hard for me not to make the Orioles at least a priority mini stack, if not full stack, when you're facing a pitcher who has walk trouble and gives up power. And that just feels like a recipe for disaster against this Orioles team. It's a reasonable hitting weather, 66 degrees in Washington. So Baltimore is definitely going to be one of the teams that I, right now I have as one of my priorities. You also have a bad bullpen behind Gray. There's a lot of reasons I could, and even if you don't stack Baltimore, I think trying to, take a Mountcastle, Rushman, Santander, Mullins, Hayes, all these guys with the power upside, Gunnar Henderson against Josiah Gray, maybe at least getting a mini stack of Baltimore today. That's where I'm at.
Yeah, I currently have Baltimore as one of the 3 or 4 teams, non-course teams I'm just going to target on DraftKings. And I also have them as actually just as good as Pittsburgh and Colorado on FanDuel. So listen, what's that?
That's interesting because Pittsburgh and Colorado are pretty cheap on FanDuel, but so is Baltimore. So I see what you're saying.
So with the caveat that you mentioned that sometimes Josiah Gray, I mean, you never know. He could put up a good game. I think it's kind of hard to ignore the upside for Baltimore in this spot. So as a matter of fact, let's for now, let's replace the Yankees with these guys. So we're going to have, it's always good to be able to get like a catcher as part of a stack that you
catcher or an infield stack. And Baltimore has with Mountcastle. I would start with Mountcastle and Rushman, and then I probably would. I mean, you've got a very cheap Frazier, but the guys I'd rather have would be like Gunnar Henderson, and then you use 1 or 2 of the outfielders. That's what I would do.
Yeah, so let's put these 5 in for now: Rushman, Mountcastle, Henderson, Mullins, and Santander. Yep. And we'll see what that looks like. I don't quite have it to get to Kremer tonight. It's always a good idea to play guys against Washington. I just had other things I wanted to do instead.
Sure. There's a lot of good pitchers on the slate, even though they're all in tough matchups. That's why I sort of wanted to look for something different, So it's just the first look mentioned. And by the way, Josiah Gray deserves to be mentioned at least in the same thing.
Yeah,
it's just guys. We always get off the board with hitting and stuff like that, and generally take the better pitch. But early in the season, I tend to like to look for these little weird pitchers. So I'm not saying it's a priority. It's just a guy who I want to. Both Gray and Kremer in my where I'm multi-entering. I think I might get a little bit of exposure to, just to get weird. Okay, Sheets. This is going to be a tough one. Why don't you start off with your thoughts on the Boston Minnesota one? Because
So I have 3 guys below my top. I have 3 guys on the top of my pitching priorities, and then I have 3 kind of pivots underneath. And somebody here is one of the pivots, and that's Chris Sale. Chris Sale at 7,500 to me is a definite option. Definitely not as good as the top three that I have, but he's going to be lower owned, and I definitely like that. I didn't quite get to Sonny Gray, although I mean he has put up a couple of pretty good performances. So I wouldn't fault anybody. It's just like they just can't play everybody. So I didn't quite get to him. And I didn't get to either of the hitting here. So listen, it's going to be high variance when you play Chris Sale. But I think I might end up doing it. We'll see exactly what I do. But I'm kind of into this because the other two pitchers I have in the second pivots here don't have the same type of upside I think as Sale does. So we're gonna see. But right now, I'm probably gonna end up playing him.
Yep. I am totally wishy-washy on this whole thing. And I think that's what I'm going to do with Sale. I think that every time Sale pitches on slates like this, I'm going to have stacks against him, and I'm going to play some of them. But look, if you look at the Twins offense, and people are like, the Twins have power, all this stuff. No, they don't. They have guys who could be very good, and in their lineup, you have no idea how it's going to shake out because, Julian will he'll probably bat eighth today because it's a lefty. But with Buxton, Correa at the top, and then Miranda at 2.9K, and Jeffers at 2,800, and then Garlick at 23, boom, there's a stack. And even Solano is probably batting third at 2,100. I only like him as part of stacks. But I'm in on the Twins here to whatever extent, whether Chris Sale is broken or not. It's not necessarily that it's just one or the other. I think it may be just that he's going to be inconsistent for a while. So I'm into the idea of taking Minnesota here in a nice stadium upgrade playing in Boston. It is only 55 degrees, but 11-mile-an-hour winds blowing out in Boston sounds good to me. So I'm into the Twins, and even to some extent, I wouldn't mind if it was a smaller slate getting to some Red Sox, but it's probably just going to be the Twins for me. And I do have them it's not a priority where I'm going to make sure they're like my number one stack, but they're going to make. There's no question. If I play 4 big lineups on DraftKings or 4 on FanDuel, one stack will be the Twins as of right now. And it might be a complimentary stack. It might be something. I just think that there's too much goodness on the righty side, and you put them in Boston. I just feel like this is a spot where I could see Minnesota breaking through. So that's where I'm at there. And I'm going to say what's up to Brent in chat, and it's true. The Twins do strike out a lot, so that's a good point that he's making right there. But I really do think that you could argue for a very cheap Minnesota stack with some upside in this matchup, and I think incredibly low ownership from what I'm looking at. So I am. You can sign me up for that one. I know, and it's weird in baseball to talk out of both sides. Liking the pitcher and liking the hitter. I did it with Lyles yesterday. It's just part of the game. You know what I mean? They're high variance, and Boston has a horrible bullpen behind Sale, and I'm ready. I'm excited about that one, actually. All right. Texas and KC, what do you got?
Yeah. So Texas and Kansas City, I have Texas as one of the pivot stacks that I was considering. And I'm probably going to go for the same guys as yesterday. So Nathaniel Lowe, first base. I'll just kind of throw some guys in. Josh Young, he's still 3,700 here. And then if he gets another good position, Janikowski at 2,500. And then Adolis Garcia, put him in here. I mean, if Heim plays, you could certainly play him. And Marcus Semien, I'll throw him in there also. I don't know if I like them quite as much as Baltimore. I think it is kind of, I guess, sort of close. I guess you probably would prefer Baltimore, but I think Texas is kind of right up there. Enough that I'll put them in here just to show you. So I definitely like them, and I'm not getting to either pitcher.
Yeah, for what it's worth, the weather in KC, 77 degrees with winds blowing out to left. Sounds like a very good hitting environment for this time of the season, even though it's not the best hitter's park. Should we reconsider maybe playing Brad Keller though? The guy's been good. There's always been, he goes through these stretches and people worry about strikeouts. I mean, he just put up 28 against the same team the other day. Now I don't love pitchers in back-to-backs, but I'm not like totally opposed to it. If Texas released the same lineup they did yesterday, today, I think I actually would play him. Which is just Garcia being out, but I think that there's some room, and we see what happens. Texas gets off to the fiery start and then just does absolutely nothing forever. I could see that happening. You just got to get out of the way away from the fiery start. So I'm kind of open to the Keller as my other get weird play. And part of the reason I'm looking for these get weird pitchers is I'll just spoil it. I like Coors way more than I usually do today, and I'm having a harder time fading it. So getting weird with my pitching is my route to play some of that. But I do think that initially I wanted to think about Texas and I wanted to think about KC, and I think they're both fine as stacks. Doesn't feel great as 5-mans, maybe more 4-mans on FanDuel. I don't know. I don't feel like this is the team that's going to score the most runs tonight, but Texas is affordable outside of the Simeon and Garcia, and it just makes an easy stack. You have the basically the cheapos outside of the Witt, Melendez, Perez guys on KC, although they're the guys you'd want to use. Everybody feels in play to me, but I think this is probably I have both teams written down, but they're probably going to be on the outside looking in because I want to limit my stacks. So I'm glad you weren't overly interested, because I might have piqued in my interest a little bit more had you been. Next up, Arizona, St. Louis. What are you going to play any Montgomery, and then what else are you doing in this game?
I'm not. He just doesn't quite get there for me at 9,500. And I'll tell you something else. I don't think I'm going to get to any of the hitting either. This is kind of not one game, but this is the closest game I have as a cross-off on the board. Interesting.
Yeah. So I again, look, I don't want to name everything. I'll prioritize at the end of the show. You guys know the drill. But at first look, I definitely have to have some interest in the Cardinals. Partly, I kind of want my money back from the Cardinals. Why are these guys priced like this when nobody ever hits for them? That was one of my weird plays. I got weird with instead of playing Young in my Texas stack, I decided to play Arenado to try and differentiate with an Arenado Contreras type of thing, and it didn't quite work. But I still think this Cardinals offense is better than people think. I also think the Diamondbacks are just a better real life baseball team than people think. So maybe a good enough reason to fade Montgomery. I think he'll look, you're playing 150. He's in the mix. I don't know how to get him in otherwise, but I do have some interest in the Cardinals. I'd like to revisit it when I see what their lineup is later. That Edman in the 9-hole keeps bugging me because he's always a shortstop I want to use when he's, because they'll bat him 9th and they'll bat him leadoff against lefties. Maybe they shift their lineup up because they really haven't been the offense that we expected. So I have mild interest in the Cardinals, but they fit into the same Texas category for me, so we can move on.
Yep. And
for me, which shocking, I don't know if I've ever had 2 slates in a row where I said I'm not interested in Toronto. It almost really could have, it burned me anyway because I didn't do well last night. But it looked like, actually Houston was the one that almost burned everybody, or did burn a lot of us. I'm basically, this is the game I'm basically off of. The one thing I would mention is that I do think that there is some upside for Bissett. I understand they got to Gausman early last night and all that stuff. I'm still not a buyer entirely into the Houston offense as currently constructed. I think that they're good, not great. After you get through the top 5, you're dealing with some real iffy guys. And I'm probably just off this game. I'm not going to fault anyone for stacking it, but I need to narrow myself somewhere. Anything for you, Sheets?
Yeah. I'm not getting to any of the pitching here, but I am getting to Toronto. They're one of the non-core stacks that I'm looking at here. I know Arcudi is not exactly the easiest guy to get after, but that's just kind of where I am right now. And I have Houston just sort of on the outside looking in to this whole group. And I guess that's it. I mean, it's not like Toronto is like a priority really, but right now they're significantly up there for me as far as stuff to play without getting too popular.
Yeah, I like what Brett just said. By the way, reminding me about maybe an Air Jordan. He's talking about Jordan Walker on St. Louis from the game before. I do want to continue to play guys like Walker who are going to break out in a big way this year. I'm expecting, but I like that you like Toronto because I think you're going to get no ownership on them. Anytime you get no ownership on Toronto, it's probably a good idea to do it. I just personally have other stacks I like a little bit better, but Urquidy, I think I have too much respect for the Houston pitching in general to usually attack them, especially Urquidy, the top four guys, I guess. And by the way, if you wanted to play Alvarez and Tucker, I'm not going to fault anybody for it. I just have to make some cuts at some point. But this is an interesting game with like less than 5% ownership basically on every player, with two, even with what I said about Houston, there's still a lot of power in these offenses. So I like the idea that you're getting a little different there. All right, Toronto and Pittsburgh and Colorado. Why don't you start us off, and then I'll jump into my.
Yeah, I have Pittsburgh and Colorado as the two top stacks overall on the slate. Just a question of how much ownership you want to eat. Now, again, this is probably, as I'm sure that you'll go over, kind of the best matchup you have when you're going to play against Colorado is to go attack Urena. Although he was very, very reasonable in his last outing, I believe. Nonetheless, I do have these two teams as rated at the top. And, it's a question of how much ownership they get versus how much you want to eat. For what it's worth, I don't see them as highly owned as they have been. I do think they will get ownership because of Arena and because they scored 13 runs yesterday against Freeland.
They're not like way more popular today.
Yeah, so I don't know. So tell me why you like Coors more than today. Tell me what's going on. And
well, starting with the weather, you've got 24-mile-an-hour winds blowing out to right center, 70 degrees. That's a huge bump up from the 55 or whatever it was yesterday. You've got Jose Arena, who is just not a good pitcher. And one thing he does do, to his credit, is it's weird because he gives up home runs, but he can also keep the ball on the ground. It's like a strange thing. And he's been fortunate to the home runs he's given up this year. I believe all of them have been solo home runs except for maybe one, but he's given up a lot of them. I just think he's gotten a little bit lucky. I am not going to fade against Urena, and Velasquez was awesome his last time out. This guy has always been all over the map, but you give me a guy who walks a lot of people in Coors with the wind like that and then trying to find the strike zone. I just feel like this game is going to go nuts. It's going to be way heavier owned on the Pittsburgh side. And I think it's going to be like pretty crazy. So maybe you make it a complimentary stack. Maybe you incorporate some 4-4s with some lower owned stacks. Maybe you make it a 3-man stack as a way to do it. But there's pretty much no way I'm not going to have a decent portion of at least pieces of this. What I would say is on the other side, I think you will get some lower ownership on guys like Chris Bryant because of the price, because everyone, play the other one. Charlie Blackmon will be low owned, which sounds nice to me. And then you've got Daza, who will probably be the next lowest owned guy. Those are the ways that get a little bit different. But I am huge. If McMahon is really going to be 10 or 15% owned, I'm in. I'm in on Profar at this price. I'm in on Crow. I just like both sides of this game a ton. The weather is doing it. I mean, this is the highest total we've seen this year so far. So I can't imagine it gets ignored. So maybe I have to find a way to navigate and like I said, do some 4-4s or use the 3-mans from this game, or maybe even do something like I don't know how to do it. I don't think you can do a 3-3-2 that profitably with playing just this game and then 2 from another game. But it's just really today. I'm finding it harder to fade than usual, especially for a big slate that's probably wrong in general. So I'm going to have to try to find ways to get a little bit different. And part of what I'm considering is my pitching. That's why I'm trying to get a little bit weird with the pitching.
The only thing I would disagree with you on is that I don't think that Blackman's going to be under owned. He's 4,100.
He hasn't been owned more than 10%, and he's projected to be 5% across.
Really? Even with the platoon and all that? Okay.
He hasn't hit a home run in a year and a half. Yeah, I don't think. I mean, maybe he will, but I just think that everybody's using those spots for Pittsburgh guys. But maybe you're right. He's consistently been the lowest owned, and he doesn't run anymore either. So you take away the speed and power, it's kind of hard to be too excited outside of the stack. So Chicago, Oakland. Look, Stroman is completely fine. I don't love the price for a guy who doesn't have a ton of strikeouts in his repertoire, but this is the A's, so you're going to get some. Stroman is lower down my list and probably going to end up on the outside looking in. I am totally cool with the Cubs stack today. I think this is totally fine. I just don't think realistically I'm going to be doing much of it myself. Uh, that's where I'm at. I'm okay with picking on Waldichuk. I'm definitely okay with picking on the A's bullpen. 54 degrees in Oakland, winds blowing out 13 miles an hour. How somehow all the winds are blowing out tonight. So yeah, it's fine, but not something I'm going to prioritize. That's where I'm at.
Yeah, so these are the two guys that I mentioned that I wouldn't mind playing, but they just don't feel like they have that huge upside. Like Waldichuk, I actually don't mind at 6,100, but I just I don't know exactly what it's going to get for me. And Stroman, I definitely don't mind at 8,800, but I mean just to get a win, you know what I mean, and just to have a good game. But 8,800, and you need a number. I think it's not like. I mean, I just kind of rather play Sale, and even though obviously Stroman's probably more likely to win and more likely to have a median game than Sale. I just don't know if 15 or whatever Stroman's going to give me or 16 is going to be enough. So we'll see. And I'm with you, by the way, on the other side of that with the Cubs. You play these righties. You can go back to Wisdom again. You play Horner, even though he's not a power guy. You go back to Horner and Suzuki and these guys, can swing a little bit. So I don't mind that. The Cubs are just literally right on the outside looking in as to my pivot stacks. So I think we're sort of in agreement on this thing.
Yeah. For what it's worth, Nico Horner has, I think, 11 or 12 stolen bases this year. The Dodgers have 2 as a team. That's pretty incredible that he could have that many. I mean, the team leaders are like in the 20s. I think it's at 20, I don't know what it is, 20, 25 or something. But the Cubs are 4th in the league in stolen bases largely because of it. They also have decent power, even though they're not a great hitting team. So they're the kind of team that you want to stack. When we talk about how does a team score runs, the Cubs fit the mold of the ways that we want: stolen bases and some power. You know what I mean? All right, moving on to Milwaukee, Seattle. Is that what you have next?
Yeah. So in the last 3 games, this is where I think the pitching is going to come from. Depending on where you pick. And for me, I mean, Logan Gilbert just seems like, I mean, I don't want to say the best play, but certainly, I can certainly argue that he's the best play. So he's going to be one of my top 3. He's cheap enough. Matchups probably better than the other good options. So I definitely like Gilbert. He's safest for me. I'll end up probably putting him in the big buy-in at the end of the day. So that's where I'm at. And as far as hitting goes, I'm not getting to see Ray, whoever, and I'm not going to get probably to either sets of bats.
Yeah, so if Colin Ray had a longer leash, I would definitely have a little bit of interest here. Also, I would play him again if he was 4K like he was last time when he put up 20, which would have been nice. I'm sort of like I don't know how Gilbert is not like one of the top plays. You can make the arguments all you want about anything. It's just an awesome spot, and he's a really good pitcher, and he's incredibly efficient. He's right now probably my top guy on DraftKings, and I was looking into whether I would consider stacking Seattle. I just think that I have too many other ones, but I don't think they're that much different than the Texas and all that. I don't love stacking in that stadium when we have actually decent weather other places, and they don't have their, I don't know. It's just I'm okay with it. I'm probably not going to get to it realistically, but I'm not going to fault anybody for that one. But I love Gilbert. All right, Braves and San Diego.
Yeah. So here's the thing. You have 2 really good options here in Strider and Snell, but both their matchups are kind of fishy, to say the least. So that's why, to me, I mean, Gilbert's just kind of a better play than these guys. But I mean, these are the other 2 guys, as far as I'm concerned, like Snell and Strider. I mean, Snell was 8,400 for Christ's sake. You know what I mean? So I also like Snell on FanDuel. Is my top player over there. And yeah, the Braves are tough, and like it or not, I'm going to have 10% of Atlanta because they're playing. That's just the way it goes. So that's it. I mean, Strider and Snell are both good plays. I prefer Gilbert to both of them, if you want to know the truth.
Mhm.
And I'd probably prefer Snell just because of price to Strider. I don't know. Oh, you have any preference between these two guys?
It's interesting with Snell that everyone thinks all these other guys are broken when they have these bad starts, and then Snell can't get anybody out, and everyone thinks he's fine. Like, they don't worry about playing him for some reason, which is just weird. But he does usually turn it on a little bit later in the season. Look, there are still strikeouts in that matchup, but it does scare me with the lefty against these Braves. The one thing he's got going for him is you've got 10-mile-an-hour winds that are coming in from the left, and it's 57 degrees. But they're kind of crosswinded, not fully directly in from left field. But it does have me just a little bit more hesitant on the stacking Atlanta, because I did consider that. And I just think maybe on a smaller slate, like if it was 6 games or 4 games, I'd be all over Atlanta here. But I just don't think I'm going to be able to do it on this slate. Maybe they'll enter in some pieces. I still like the 10% every day thing, but when you get the full slates, it's kind of hard to do because there's so many other teams to consider. I have Strider as the top, raw pitcher on the slate, and even that is a little nerve wracking. You got some good hitters in San Diego, so not like an automatic thing. So that's why Gilbert rates a little bit better. But I do have those 3 as my main pitchers as of right now. But it's certainly why I'm willing to look at why I've mentioned all the guys we talked about earlier that I was throwing out there, because you just can get different enough by playing these guys, and I don't know if Strider or Snell are in for like a 35 tonight. It doesn't feel like that kind of a matchup for me. Gilbert probably either. So maybe that's why I'm considering some of the cheaper guys. All right, and Cheech, I'll let you go on this one because you got to do your normal if you didn't like any of that thing.
Yeah, if you didn't like any of that, I have to say I don't know what else to offer you here. I don't want to get to Kershaw here at 10-1. Against the Mets, I guess I couldn't argue against him really, but I just like the other guys better. And McGill, again, maybe a different slate. I'll play McGill and maybe against a different opponent, but not today. But I think obviously both these pitchers are good enough to keep me off of the hitters, so I'm probably off of the late night Dodger hammer tonight.
All right, I'm in on the Dodgers. I'm not sure where McGill is right now with his, process and everything. He hasn't thrown he hasn't pitched really that deep. Had a soft matchup, then he pitched fine against San Diego. I still think that he profiles the type of pitcher that this Dodgers team can hit. And I'm looking for some low-owned stuff because I want to play my Coors game a little bit more than usual today. Why couldn't I play a Dodger 4 or 5 man with one of those stack with sides of those games? I'm okay with taking a shot. I think McGill's a good pitcher for what it's worth. But I mean, I thought Peterson was a good pitcher too, and I still take the Dodgers. It's a little different because McGill doesn't have the same control issues. And I am totally cool though with the Dodgers stack. I actually have them probably a little bit too high, to be honest with you. But I have them 5th right now in teams I'm looking at. And it's a lot to do because I think you're getting them at like 1 or 2%. And I don't think you need to get cute with it. They're too expensive for people to play with other things. But because Coors is there's cheap spots in Coors, you could play like the top 4 of the Dodgers lineups with Coors. You could play, or I would actually go 1, 2, 3, 5 and play Outman over JD today. I'm totally actually okay with the Dodgers. And, the Mets bullpen's been used quite a bit lately. Using that to, any sort of excuse I can, but I'm actually okay with the Dodgers tonight. And 5th is, I don't think realistically they're the 5th best, but when you factor in 0 ownership and the talent and upside, the thing that worries me about them this year is the Dodgers have the fewest stolen bases in the league by a wide margin. They're playing on old analytics. It's horribly managed, but it's Dave Roberts' fault to some extent, but it's really the team has the whole analytics. They're still playing the home run game and all that stuff. And it's just not going to work as easy early in the year. And you'd think by giving up the most stolen bases in baseball, with which the Dodgers do by a landslide, nobody gives up more stolen bases than the Dodgers. You'd think that they would learn to themselves start running. And I'm just waiting for that time. And they don't have like a ton, but Freeman can steal bases. Like Mookie Betts can certainly steal bases. James Outman can steal bases. Vargas can steal bases. Rojas can even steal bases. I don't know why they aren't letting these guys run at all. And it's probably wrong to have the Dodgers 5th right now, but that's where I've got them. I do think that they're an interesting low-owned stack, even in spite of all the things I'm a little nervous about. those things I'm nervous about would probably make me stay off of them as chalk. But I have the teams that I like. Pittsburgh and Colorado, sure, of course. And then I'm on to the Orioles, Minnesota, the Angels, Yankees, and then the Dodgers. I guess the Dodgers are 6th for me. That's how I've got and then Gilbert, Strider, Snell. And I have no problem playing Kershaw. When you have other pitchers with the same range of outcomes, why not take the guy I'm not going to say like he's the most consistent at usually getting you 20-ish fantasy points. And that might be harder to come by tonight than you think. So when he's priced in, he can outscore Strider in a game when they're facing San Diego. And the Mets are no picnic either. But at Kershaw, at like no ownership, I'm going to have to at least consider him in my pool just for the.
It's actually the thing you mentioned about the Dodgers. It's actually quite an interesting troll because for those of you who are you before he ever came to the Dodgers, like Dave Roberts was famous for like a Yankee destroying stolen base in the 2004 ALCS. During that big comeback, he ended up basically decided to steal second, I think, on his own, and then they ended up like winning the series and going on to winning everything. And now that he's the manager, they refuse to steal when the bases are like 4 times the size.
Yeah, it doesn't make it. Yeah, it's very strange to me, and that by the way, that actually made me into a Red Sox fan for a little while because he was our Dodger guy and we all loved him as a guy. So
right.
The Red Sox and broke the Yankees' heart in that game. That was huge. But anyway, I think this is an interesting slate. I think that, like I said, it looks like a very limited number of pitchers that you really want, but I'm going to probably vary off of some of the chalk for my pitching and then try to find these low-owned stacks to play with Pittsburgh and Colorado. I don't think you can get away with, unless you get weird with the pitching, Pittsburgh and Colorado together, or Pittsburgh with the Orioles or Pittsburgh with, probably those would be the main ones that I think I'd worry about in terms of ownership. But we'll be live later and we'll go through it. It should be a fun one. Looking forward to it myself. And want to talk a little bit real quickly about FanDuel? Do you have anything you want to add?
I just wanted to mention, then I have to take a call on this. We can come back and do the NBA in a minute, but I have I like Baltimore as much as Pittsburgh and Colorado on FanDuel. That was what I was going to say.
Okay.
And then I also like Snell as my FanDuel.
Cool. Sounds good. And my FanDuel stuff is almost exactly the same, except I will be using more Kershaw than other people.
So if you want to, in like 15 minutes, come back and do NBA.
Sounds good.
Okay.